It's that time again. The annual conference of the American Society of Ag Consultants, otherwise known as ASAC, is going to be held in Fort Myers, Florida, this November 4th and 5th. Kurt Covington is one of 9 professionals who will address the conference. The other speakers who will cover a wide range of topics represent Florida Farm Bureau, Florida Citrus Commission, University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture, National Ag Law Center, Risk Mitigators and Advisors, Tyler Associates, as well as the lead economist for dairy at CoBank, and myself, Chrissy Wozniak from North American Ag. The day and a half of presentations will be followed by ag tours on Tuesday afternoon at Echo Farms, one of my favorite places here in Fort Myers. Attendees will experience farming at its most creative, with unique demonstrations, plants, and techniques being used to help farmers and urban gardeners in developing countries. A second tour at Echo will showcase simple technologies that can improve food, water, and shelter for millions of people. A third tour of a hydroponic grower is also being planned. For more information and to register, visit www.agconsultants.org. That's www.agconsultants.org. See you there. Welcome to North American Ag Spotlight. I'm Chrissy Wozniak. I'm excited to have a guest back again on the podcast. It's been a couple of years, but I've been following his excellent work and needed to invite him back to talk about a really important issue. He's the founder of Lonesome Lands, podcast and blog dedicated to preserving the heritage and landscape of rural America. Through Lonesome Lands, he shares stories that highlight the beauty, struggles, and triumphs of rural life. And he's also a strong advocate for the protection of private property rights and opens the dialogue about the obvious war on agriculture. Today, we're going to discuss the implications of RFID regulation on the cattle industry. From McClelland, Iowa, I'd like to welcome Jim Mundorf. Welcome, Jim. Thank you so much for coming back and talking to me.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with your background. Can you give the listeners a little bit of your backstory?
Yeah, so I grew up on a farm in southwest Iowa, outside of Griswold, Iowa, where we raised corn, soybeans, and we had when I was growing up, we had a feedlot and a small cow-calf herd, and now we just have a cow-calf herd. But yeah. So then I guess after I went to college for journalism, or I got a degree in communications. I was a minor in journalism for a while, and then so when I got out, I started my own business, which is called the Drover House, where I sell Longhorn cattle horn stuff. As you can, some of the stuff is a little bit behind me. Some of that stuff I use for my business called the Drover House. And but after a while, I've realized I could kind of start my own media company or whatever you want to call it. So I've been writing and doing podcasts about issues in agriculture that are kind of important to me, as far as the family farm and small independent farmers and ranchers, and kind of focusing on that in the last few years. So,
yeah, that's great. So let's jump right in. What is RFID? Tell me about the legislation that's recently passed.
Yeah, so that's one thing. A lot of people, I don't know if it's confusing for people, but they'll say RFID or EID. And like the government or USDA, I would say, has kind of changed it to EID. And electronic ID just encompasses everything, I think, that can be read by a reader. And RFID is radio frequency identification. EID, it just stands for electronic identification. I think, which, I don't know. I think they're all still radio frequency, but if there is a different something or other, it just encompasses everything. But yeah, the mandated electronic identification is what we're talking about now, and is what is right now planned to be put in place in November in the U.S., and those are electronic identification ear tags for cattle that can be read by a wand, and they can hold all kinds of information. And there is, so USDA put out a rule for comment January 2023, I think, and then this last April, they said that they are implementing the rule. All animals of breeding or sexually intact, meaning they're breeding used for breeding animals over 18 months of age will be required to have an electronic identification ear tag when crossing state lines. So it's kind of putting the toe in the door, I guess, of what a lot of us have feared is coming. And what has come out recently is that USDA on their own website and in their own words, this is the beginning of their plan to have electronic ID mandate on all animals from birth to slaughter.
Right. And so how does it differ from the ear tags today, which seem to be doing a perfectly fine job?
Right. And that's one thing that even I forget to mention when you get to talking about this stuff, but a lot of it, they'll talk about traceability. We have to do this for traceability. And the U.S. already has a strong traceability program, where, in those animals, I guess, 18 to 8 months of older, they're already required to have an ear tag that can be read, but there's just a few different options, of USDA approved ear tags. What is changing with this rule is there will be one option of the kind of ear tag you have to have, and it has to be electronic that can be read by a reader. And so this weird thing about that a little bit is that it doesn't change. It doesn't have to carry any information. There's no mandate on, it's just the ear tag that has to be able to be read by a reader, even though no one has to have readers. No information has to be on it, which is kind of a giveaway of what the plan is. This obviously, they're obviously not stopping at this. This is just, like I said, getting the toe in the door, for the program.
Yeah, right. And that's, I think, where a lot of people are being lulled into, oh, it's really nothing. Right.
Right.
They're only
And that's kind of
mandating
by the plan.
this.
Like when I read it and started looking into it, and like I have a podcast out with Bill Bullard, who he's the, I think, CEO of RCAF, which is a cattlemen's organization, and they worked hard to stop this. USDA has been trying to implement this for the past 20 years. And his whole thing that he talked about a lot was trade. They want to do this because it makes it easier for trade for the beef packing corporations. But there's now, what I've talked about a lot is there is a push to measure greenhouse gas emissions on all of agriculture, and the way that I believe that the corporations plan to measure greenhouse gas emissions in livestock is through electronic identification ear tags, and so that is why there is this new push. But I think it also is tied to trade as well. I mean, it's that makes sense as well. And there is this talk of this imminent threat of foot and mouth disease, which, I've talked about how they're trying to scare everyone to put these tags in, and I'm looking into foot and mouth disease, and it is an incredibly contagious and kind of scary disease. But the goal for them but that leads you back to trade. Like if it does come into the U.S., they can regionalize it, meaning they'll still be able to export meat from a region that doesn't have a foot and mouth disease. And so in order to verify the regions, they want to have this EID, which, like I said, right now the rule that comes in doesn't do anything to do that because those tags hold no information, or they're not required to hold any information. But
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of
Yeah, that makes sense. And as you know, I'm originally from Canada, and then 4 years ago, started this, what's going on in the world, and then moved from Canada to Florida because I didn't want to live in that world. I would like to preserve my freedom. So moved
right.
here to Florida, and I've done a lot of research on ESG, which is environmental social governance scoring. And as I watch the agriculture industry, I see how it lines up with that. So how do you think? And I agree with you that that this is tied to carbon scoring for sure. So how do you think that's going to go? What's the next step in this slippery slope?
Yeah, well, the next step as far as the tags would just be to expand it. Like I said,
Yeah.
USDA has a plan, and NCBA, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, before their convention this year, and they are partnered with the USDA. And when I say that, I don't mean like they work alongside them or they work together. The USDA gave NCBA $445,000 and some odd dollars to increase the traceability program. Nothing was
Right.
ever said about how that money would go to increase the traceability program, but a few days after that, NCBA president started writing op-eds, pushing this idea of, we're under this imminent threat of foot and mouth disease and we have to have electronic ID ear tags to save the industry. And so like that is how they're partnering with them. Like they have paid NCBA to kind of indoctrinate their own members to go along with this stuff.
What about the
And
cost to the farmers too?
yeah, so right. And so that's interesting because during this, they came out with this policy before their convention. They had a bunch of pushback, and their goal was to vote in a policy that they would recommend to the USDA that would recommend that would say that they wanted birth to slaughter electronic ID ear tags, but their members pushed back on it, and a lot of guys made videos, sale barn people, a lot. There was just a lot of pushback within the entire industry, and they weren't able to get that policy passed at their convention. But within 2 weeks after their convention, and before this mandate was even in place, the USDA or an omnibus bill was passed through the House and Senate, and signed into law. And part of that bill had $15 million in it to pay for um, electronic ID tags if they happen to be mandated. Well, then a couple of weeks after that, they were mandated. But the National Cattlemen's Beef Association talked about how they were an integral part in getting that $15 million in that bill. Um, and they kind of bragged about how they were able to get that passed and that money would be covered. And it's kind of like everything you hear today, like today after last night, the Democrat convention and all this stuff we're going to give away, you're going to have free health care and free college education and free all this, but nothing is free, right? Like someone is
Exactly.
paying for this stuff. And when cattle producers are asking the taxpayers to foot the bill on these tags that they don't even want, I mean, to me that the whole thing just stinks, with corruption. And for the NCBA to have their convention and their members to tell them that they don't want an EID mandate, and then they go straight to Congress and say that we need you guys to pay for mandated electronic ID tags. They're lobbying for the rule without lobbying for the rule. And a Congressman, Thomas Massey, put on Twitter that National Cattlemen's Beef Association is in support of the rule, meaning they are in support of mandated electronic ID tags. Yesterday, an op-ed came out from National Cattlemen's Beef Association president where he, I mean, pretty much demanded that the industry go along with the mandated electronic ID tags. And so it's kind of, to me, part of it is good because it's kind of shedding a light. Like I feel like I can sound like a crazy person because I'm constantly going after these NCBA and how it operates, but I think this kind of stuff is showing more people how it operates. The reason I get wound up about it is because I do a lot of research and spend a lot of time, and I'm constantly scratching my head of how these people can be so corrupt and no one really sees it. But so sometimes it's a little helpful to for them to kind of open their mouths and make it easier for me and others to spotlight how they are so corrupt and they really don't care about the producers or what the producers want. They care about their corporate partners, which is
Right.
the packing and corporate cattle feeding industry.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we should be sounding the alarm to consumers as well. Within ESG, if this traceability goes all the way to the grocery store and you use your credit card to purchase the beef, now they can tell you you've used this much carbon and now they can limit, right? And that's where it's going for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
I'm not sure how we do sound crazy a lot of the time, especially us that have been researching it for so long, but that is where it's going. And how do we reach those consumers as well? We're only 2% of the population in agriculture. We need more voices, right?
yeah. And, one thing that's hard when you start looking into this stuff and you think it's crazy your own self, and how do I tell these people without being crazy? Then you have to do the research. And so I pulled up I've done a number of these podcasts and I haven't had this quote available, but I read the Tyson Foods, I think it was their 2022 ESG report. And in their own ESG report, they said Tyson Foods will also refine Scope 3 estimates. And if you're familiar with ESG, Scope 3 is the calculating of greenhouse gas emissions from your suppliers and your customers. That's what Scope 3 is. And so what they said about that was that they said they want to refine their Scope 3 estimates and goals as supplier data and standardized methodologies for calculations across industry sectors become available. And that is exactly what EID would do. A standardized methodology for calculation. So the trouble that a lot of these corporations have with their ESG and calculating ESG scores of their consumers or of their suppliers is, farmers and ranchers aren't calculating greenhouse gas emissions, and they're not going to. But so the goal is for EID is to make it incredibly easy for farmers and ranchers to start doing those calculations. And there's a $3 billion government program that has rolled out it's kind of I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's like they're trying to kind of just get the ball rolling and test how these different plans can work. It's called the Carbon Smart Commodity program, and it's all about greenhouse gas emissions. And they've given $3 billion to different corporations and universities, and a lot of it, when it comes to the beef side, it all includes EID. And then they have this whole program where they're implementing, where, you can click anywhere in the world and type in what kind of agriculture you're doing, and they will tell you how to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. And I believe that the goal with this climate smart commodity is they will get down to the county level,
Right.
to where you tell them how many acres you have, and they'll tell you how many cattle you can run. And that is where it gets really scary.
Yeah, that's it.
So,
And I've seen already, I was talking to a cabbage farmer a few months ago in North Carolina, and cabbage and Christmas trees, and they sell primarily to Walmart. So Walmart
yeah.
is that I guess the venue through which
Hmm.
the ESG scoring can go through even now, even today. And they had to um, really refine what they were doing and make these reports to Walmart to be able to sell to them. So it's already impacting farmers on the ground.
Yeah.
It's not like some faraway thought, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of people who've signed up for the CID thing. Like right now, there's a sustainable beef tour. And, that sounds great to people. And I think they go around and they talk about good things. I haven't been to it, but I've seen pictures and heard about it. And they go to different ranches and they talk about cover crops and increasing efficiency and all of that kind of stuff. But it's put on by the Trust in Beef, which is a farm, this goes down a whole nother rabbit hole. It's Farm Journal got $40 million from this, which is a media company, the largest, I think, ag media company in the country. They got $40 million from the USDA, this grant to do this. And their beef program is called Trust in Beef, where they want people to sign up and start doing these calculations. And they'll tell you you're calculating how you can reduce your greenhouse gases and how we're going to make, save the climate and all this kind of stuff. And it gets people, it doesn't sound real nefarious, but when you get it down to it, the way you can reduce your um, carbon emissions is by reducing your production. And that's been proven through Denmark, Ireland, these places that have mandated electronic ID tags, and they have these strict ESG rules. And I think Denmark now has a tax on, I think, per head of cattle, which has been implemented within the last year. And Ireland has a plan to euthanize, I think, 40,000 head within a certain number of years of their cattle herd, and all in the name of climate change. So,
Yeah, unbelievable. And another implication, I guess, would for of this on animal owners. A dear friend of mine, Mindy Patterson from the Cavalry Group, who she exists to protect animal owners, but she brought to my attention that the that this will create a database of animal owners, and it will spread to all animal owners. Not they start with cattle, and they'll be subject to Freedom of Information Act requests, which is huge. And then
yeah,
now animal owners can be easily accessed by animal extremists or
right.
climate extremists. So we can say goodbye to privacy. What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
Or just anybody that doesn't like you, that wants to put a
Right.
lawsuit. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. And she has seen it on the front lines because she has fought with these, I know she's been involved in these lawsuits and different things with the animal rights nuts on the pet ownership side. Um, but yeah, and in the end, I don't blame anybody for using electronic identification ear tags. They're a valuable tool. Like I always say, one of the biggest opponents I know of uses them in every single head of cattle on his place. Um, and the reason he does that is because he can put information in there that makes him part of a program that adds value to his cattle. Once those are mandated and that information is mandated, that value goes away, and all cattle are they're going to have the source verification and all that stuff on that tag. I listened to a guy who's had a podcast, and he was talking about he's building a beef packing plant, and he's talking about how we have the technology where you could scan your package of beef and see exactly where it comes from and the family that raised it and all that stuff. And that is valuable information. You know, that would be convenient, and it would be nice to have, and it'd be a great marketing tool. But the problem is, and if the beef packer wants to pay for that, they should be able to pay for that. And make a deal with the cattle producer and pay for that, but it should not be a government mandate. And it just goes back to like the digital currency. What is it? Central banking digital currency, where they want everybody to have you know, their it all through the government, all your money just be controlled and digital, which you look on the good side, and there are good parts of that. They would be convenient, it would be easy to track and easy to budget and do all kinds of things. But the problem is we have these, people who want to control you. Like if there wasn't
Right.
people that wanted to control every aspect of your life, and the reason for doing this wasn't to control every aspect of your life, some of these things would make sense. But the fact that they've already shown that the real goal is control with these programs and these devices, and so that's what you have to be wary of, and that's why we just can't do these things, because this information, in the end, could control you. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And in the any tyrannical system in history has never come out and said, "Hi, I'm a tyrant. Let me
right,
control you." They have to have a grain of truth in there. And, I've seen with my own eyes, just a month and a half ago in DC, we met with USDA and, or with, at USDA with APHIS, and they were giving us an update on bird flu. And this is one of the biggest examples of the USDA not using any common sense or logic, and really is really in between that line of either they're completely incompetent or there's something nefarious going on. She explained to us how bird flu is transmitted through the migration of birds, and was telling us that when the bird poop falls on the farm, the chickens eat it, breathe it in, and then of course they have a chicken test, get sick, they're tested, and then the entire barn of chickens is stamped out. They call it the stamped out strategy. So they kill all of them, millions of chickens, and so we asked, well, so how you can't stamp out the birds in the wild. So what's the plan here? Well, we're going to continue to stamp out. And I asked, I said, so what's going to happen with the birds in the wild? Is this just going to be perpetual? And the amazing thing that she said was, well, nature will take care of it. Nature will create birds that are resistant because the ones that aren't will die, right? And then you'll have resistant birds, and then we just have to wait till then. And I said, well, wouldn't the logical next step be to allow bird flu to go through a barn, full biosecurity, take the birds that survive because they won't all die out of millions, and create a new flock? Oh no, that's not what we do. And I said, but why? Why wouldn't you do that? Doesn't that make sense? In the last 2 years, we'd have a fully resistant flock of birds. Yeah, that's just not how USDA does it. We do the stamp out method. And I said, so you're not trying to solve the problem. You just told me that it would work because you said it works in nature. Why wouldn't it work in a barn? Of course it would work in a barn. And she just got frustrated and said, that's not how we do it. And now, listening to dairy farmers being pressured to test their cows,
Right.
what's happening? Is it incompetence or is it nefarious?
Yeah. Well, to go back to this EID thing and traceability, the only thing, the real fear they're trying to put in the cattle industry is foot and mouth disease, which is highly contagious. I've been reading about it here the last couple of days, and this whole op-ed that the president of NCBA came out with is, and they had a TV show where they say it's not a matter of time, it's a matter of, or it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Like foot and mouth disease is going to be here, and the only way to save the industry is EID tags. But that's like, why is that? I've never heard on any of these shows or read any of these articles where they talk about how can we stop it from coming? Why is it coming here? And the reason that it is coming here is because we have a completely open border as well as a completely open import system that is not regulated. The regulations on our importing and foot and mouth disease can come in on packages. It can come in on clothing. It can come in on people. It's not harmful to people, but it would decimate the cow herd. And it's highly contagious. So once it's in, it can travel through the air, I think up to 12 miles. And cattle suck in a lot of air, so they're highly susceptible to it. And so why, and we've had it eradicated since 1929. And so why all of a sudden is it not a question of if, it's a question of when? 100 years later, we haven't had it in this country for 100 years. And the answer to that I don't think they want to answer is because we have this completely open and unregulated system of imports. Brazil has foot and mouth disease, but like I said, apparently they use EID tags and they're able to regionalize it. And they say, well, if we don't slaughter cattle from the region that it's in and import them into your country, but that's also, they self-regulate those regions and that whole certification, and they're the most corrupt country in the world as far as the beef industry is concerned, for sure. And so we're really relying on these incredibly corrupt corporations who are importing cattle from countries that have foot and mouth disease into this country. And the reason why NCBA thinks the only way to do it is control it is because they're partnered with the beef packers, and importing, this lean meat is central to their profitability. And really the whole beef industry that they've kind of created, it's central to how they've created it. It's just importing tons and tons of lean meat from these underdeveloped countries where it's very cheap. And, but, there was a time Brett Kinsey, the RCAP president, sent me a text, and he went through the timeline of how these regulations have been whittled away and whittled away, and now I think the USDA inspects foreign beef packing facilities that import into the U.S. every 2 to 3 years. And so, and the beef packers and those facilities are told they don't inspect all the facilities, they inspect randomly, but those facilities are told when the USDA is coming. And so everything can be, changed every 2 to 3 years and brought up to up to par. And once USDA leaves, it can go right back to how it was. And that, so to me, that, like, we're just hammering the American livestock producer with EID tags, but why aren't we talking about, you know, increasing inspections on foreign beef packers?
Why is
it
it
goes
always
back to
regulate
who
the people?
controls, who controls, the rulemaking process at the USDA. It's the corporations. It's not the American. They don't care what the American rancher wants. They care what, JBS, Tyson, Cargill, they care what they want. And they get rules written specifically for them, which is what this EID rule is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad, but very obvious when you really start to look, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess my next question would be, I think I had you on the show 3 years ago, and then 2 years ago, I heard one of your videos, and you had just started raising the alarm about this issue. And I remember calling you, and I think we talked for about an hour, and I was just, what can I do? Like, I feel powerless. What can I do? And I remember clearly you said, I don't know. It's bleak, but we have to do something.
Right.
And so I remember getting off the phone and going, well, what's the something? I don't know what the something is. So I thought really hard about it. I shifted my podcast to also include a lot more policy. And then I joined American Agri-Women. I've been to DC twice. I really taken those words seriously. We have to do something. We have to at least try.
Right.
And so what is your advice to the consumer, to farms, to anybody in agribusiness? What can we all be doing? How can we do our part?
Well, the easy answer to that, Harriet Hagman has, and I have on my list, I need to call my representative again today. Harriet Hagman has, she's in the House of Representatives for Wyoming, and she has an amendment that would ban the use of, I think it's kind of weird how, they have to word things a certain way, but it would stop this EID mandate is what it would do. It would make it to where they can't use any funds or the USDA just wouldn't be able to do it. I was trying to go back and read it, and it's hard to find. I was just trying to go back and read it right before this deal, but it's hard to find. But so the main thing is to tell your representatives to support Harriet Hageman's amendment to the appropriations bill that would ban electronic identification ear tags in cattle and the mandate. I think there's also a resolution to disapprove the rule. I think Mike Rounds introduced that in the Senate. And so if you call any senator, ask them to support the motion, the resolution, what did I say? The disapproval resolution of the rule in the Senate, or the Senate Ag Committee, I think is who that goes through. But then on a larger level, one thing that I am concerned about is know your policy of your ag organizations. Farm Bureau has a policy that I don't think hardly any of their members know about that supports this mandated RFID, the USDA's rule. It supports the RFID rule. And this is something I'm kind of working on right now. And if you look through, and Farm Bureau doesn't make their policy book real widely, it's not real easy to find, but I found it. And if you look through that policy, it's just a head scratcher. Like, there's just a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with agriculture. It's just odd, but I think, Farm Bureau, the way it's set up, it's a good organization, and it has a chance to do a lot of good things, because they work on the county level up to the state level and then up to the national level. But I think what happens is when you get to the national level and American Farm Bureau in Washington, D.C., it just becomes incredibly corrupt. and they don't care. They're lobbyists. They're not farmers. They're not ranchers. And they'll bring in farmers and ranchers to talk to the politicians. And then when they go home, I feel like they probably, and the same with the NCBA, they just kind of go back to pushing their agenda. And so I think it is important, not just to be a part of these organizations. And for the NCBA, I would say stop paying your membership dues, stop going to their convention. Like, they're advertising people to come to their convention again this year, and that's where they have their membership votes. Well, last year, your membership vote did not count for anything. I mean, they passed a policy and they are lobbying against it, according to a congressman and their own president's op-ed. They're lobbying against what their members voted on. And so what is the point of being a member for that organization?
Yeah, good point.
And so, yeah, there are a lot of powerful ag organizations, but I think the members need to become more aware of their actual policy and where they actually stand on these issues. So,
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. So where can people find you?
Yeah, so I have, unfortunately, summers are really hard for me, and I was hoping to have more people to write and do stuff. So I haven't had a lot going on this summer, but I'm working on stuff now. And so I'm at lonesomelands.com. And then if you go for that on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that is, you'll find what I've been doing and what I'm posting. So, and YouTube's probably my biggest platform. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And one last question for you. Why do you serve the industry this way? Why do you have this deep heart for trying to sound an alarm for everyone, even years ago?
It's not, that is a good question, because it's almost like, when I started Lonesome Lands, I just kind of wanted to write about agriculture a little bit and start writing and doing things. And when I started looking at things, it's because no one, very few. I mean, I don't want to say no one, because there's people like you and there's other people who I brought on the podcast and different things like that. But it's very few, and there needs to be more people really representing the small, independent agriculture. And I think agriculture now, when people say they're advocates or they're advocating for agriculture, it doesn't really. There's a lot of really bad actors in agriculture. And this ESG movement is what has brought that out and opened people's eyes to that. They're not working, the people at Cargill, Tyson, JBS, these big corporations are not working for the small farmer. We've lost 107,000 small farm and cattle ranches in the last 5 years. I think 400,000 or something small farms altogether. It's crazy. And so if you are an advocate for agriculture, that is an abject failure. And I'm involved in that, I guess. And so to me, it's just, I want to see agriculture stay independent and farmers and ranchers keep their freedom. That's important to me. It's what I grew up with. It's what I want my kids to have. And so that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for what you do, and thank you for giving people courage to also talk about it, as that's important.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for talking about it.
And thanks to all who are watching or listening. If you want to learn more, links are provided in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to North American Ag Spotlight on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Listen Notes. Or if you prefer video, you can find us on Rumble or Telegram channels, or really wherever you listen to podcasts. If you like this episode, I would love it if you shared it. Have a great day.